Norah O'Donnell is reporting from Washington, where people are paying tribute to President George H.W. Bush. The president's flag-covered casket lies in state under the soaring dome of the Capitol Rotunda, and a steady stream of visitors has passed through since last night.
One of the planes that serves as Air Force One carried the former president and members of his family from Houston to Joint Base Andrews near Washington. The casket was then brought to the U.S. Capitol shortly before sunset, a spectacular, gorgeous sunset. They say it's almost like Mother Nature knew this was a very special evening. A large crowd, cell phones in hand, waited to capture the historic moment. Norah is on Capitol Hill with more on this part of the story. Norah, good morning to you.
Hey, good morning to you. That's right. And I went and visited some of the people who have been waiting in line all night to catch a glimpse of the former president and pay their respects. And you know what they said? That they came here because this marks the end of an era, because the last president of the greatest generation was brought here to Washington for a final time. He lay in state in the U.S. Capitol Rotunda, which is now open 24 hours a day for people to come and pay their respects. It will be open for about 36 hours, and he will continue to lie in state for another day before his state funeral. That is tomorrow morning at the National Cathedral here in Washington.
Throughout the evening, thousands kept coming, including his Vice President Dan Quayle and Defense Secretary Dick Cheney, who went on to serve his son as Vice President. Then President Trump, accompanied by First Lady Melania. Earlier, Mr. Trump sent Air Force One, designated as Special Air Mission 41, to bring President Bush from Houston back to the city where he served for a quarter century, ultimately in the highest office. His son, former President George W. Bush, waved, just as both had so many times as president. Back in Washington, beneath a watercolor sky, his casket was carried by pallbearers into the Capitol. It's where he started his political career a half-century earlier as a congressman from Texas. Inside, a military honor guard placed the last U.S. president to serve in combat on the same platform which once held the casket of President Abraham Lincoln. And tears filled the eyes of some of the most loyal members of his inner circle.
President Bush personified grace.
House Speaker Paul Ryan recalled Mr. Bush was the first president he campaigned and voted for.
The whole experience really drew me into politics.
And Vice President Pence remembered a letter his son received in August.
When our son made his first tailhook landing as a Marine aviator on the USS George Herbert Walker Bush, I took the liberty of writing the ship's namesake, just in time for my son's winging. There came not only a signed photograph, but, of course, a letter.
Outside, waiting in lines, others who had never heard from the former president personally said they still felt his message.
He served, he was a war hero, and he really represents service, and he represents American greatness to me.
American greatness. That was some of the words I heard this morning, too, as I talked to people who were going in to pay their respects to former President George H.W. Bush. You know what they also mentioned? That it was important, one in particular, a man named David, brought his son Keegan, 14 years old, to come see the president lay in state. And he said, you know what? I wanted to show him that there are still great men out there and that public service is a noble calling.